Hi, my name is Nilu. I'm here for the video check and the interview questions for this portion of the Some Things Mentor role. Starting off with the first question of what am I most passionate about and why? I'm the most passionate for living a life that reflects the idea of I am much more capable than I think, because this is something I find with confidence that confidence in anyone, whether yourself or someone else, often tends to grow from having someone believe in you first before you oftentimes believe in yourself. And I've experienced a lot of this growing up within my own life where I've underestimated what I was possibly capable of, but grew the most when I stayed consistent and allowed myself to keep trying, even though I wasn't immediately feeling that confidence. And because of that, I've been very passionate about creating and participating in as many experiences that challenge my comfort zone in a sportive way, where that's either learning a new skill, going to some place that's new for me, or encouraging someone to take a step that they might otherwise not have done. And that motivate me. And what motivates me is the idea that growth is often built through small intentional experiences and decisions that gradually reshape how we see ourselves. And I want to continue living a way that reinforces that belief, not just for my own sake, but in how I encourage and support the people around me. The next question is, what professional or extracurricular experience am I the most proud of accomplishing and why? The first thing that comes to mind for me is when I used to work for the UCSD Asylum Seeker Medical Screening and Stabilization Program, where I had this one case that had a very lasting impact on me, which involved a family of 9 from Afghanistan, a mother, a father, and their 7 children, all ranging from the ages of about 3 years old to about 18 or 19 years old. And they stayed at our facility for nearly a month, in which our medical team was responsible for coordinating and following up with each family member's individual needs and different circumstances that each of them were going through at the time. And since I spoke the same language as the family, which was Farsi, I was able to provide a lot of meaningful interpreting services when they needed to speak to any medical staff. And outside of these more formal medical interactions that I had with them, if I, for example, were to be running around from place to place within the facility doing my job, and if one of them were around and run into me, they would come up to me and say hi, and we would have sometimes some chats at various times during their duration of their stay. And this experience was really meaningful to me because it was my first ever direct in-person exposure to the consequences of limited access to healthcare and seeing how delayed or inaccessible medical care, whether because of financial barriers, displacement, or limited resources, could allow otherwise manageable conditions, or what we consider in the US to be otherwise manageable conditions, can become much more severe, which gave me a new perspective on health inequities. It also made me appreciate a lot more about the healthcare resources that we have access to as a country and myself on an individual level. And it made me more aware that many people's circumstances are shaped by factors outside of their control and how devastating that can be. Most importantly, that experience reinforced the importance of approaching every person with empathy rather than making assumptions about any of them and their circumstances. It taught me that meaningful support begins by understanding someone's circumstances and meeting them where they're at, as well as the importance of just having someone to talk to outside of formal interactions. I remember that the mother of the family, she would sometimes want to go outside to just get some fresh air or look at the sky. And at one point I remember she just asked me like, hey, if you have a minute, I would love to just sit down and look at the clouds with you. And all of that has been a lesson to me that I've continued to carry with me working in healthcare. The next question being, what is the most challenging experience that I've been through, and what about that experience made it challenging? Was that I was trying to balance a very demanding academic schedule while working and preparing for my future and participating in a lot of traditional pre-med extracurricular activities such as hospital volunteering, getting in contact with other doctors to provide shadowing opportunities. And there were periods where in this time that I felt like I had to perform well in every single area all at once, all the time, and especially while I was doing it alone. And it was difficult to truly know when to push myself and when to take a step back, since I had too much of just push through it or all or nothing mentality. Especially since I was a student that had always performed really well academically. This wasn't just normally a test of my ability, this was a test of my identity. My academic performance was so heavily tied into my identity because I have just always consistently gotten straight A's, and I was normally known for how well I've done in school, either through friends, family, or other peers. It had just felt so overwhelming and embarrassing to share with my family, friends, my therapist, including others that worked at the university with the purpose of helping their students, such as my professors and academic advisors. I had just gone through everything alone to preserve my reputation, so to speak. And what especially made it challenging just simply wasn't the workload in of itself either. It was learning how to manage with the pressure I put on myself. And over time, I realized that trying to do everything alone wasn't sustainable, and I became a lot more intentional through this journey by asking for support from others, from other loved ones, prioritizing my responsibilities, and recognizing that setbacks didn't define what I was capable of. And once my poor academic performance began, that overwhelming all or nothing mentality had begun to manifest and was a true indicator that I had lost my momentum to really continue with progression towards a better academic transcript, because I felt like I had already failed, and it would be too hard to be able to be in a position to succeed again. And that experience really importantly taught me how to be more resilient and gave me a better understanding of how overwhelming life can feel, even when I, on the outside, had been appearing to everyone else that I had been doing fine. And because of that, I try to approach others with empathy and not making any assumptions of what they're carrying. I would rather cultivate an environment where they feel comfortable being transparent and honest with me about that. I really realized that I myself was way more capable of what I thought at the time for myself, and that helped me build back my momentum and improved my academic self-belief. And as a result, I was able to take a step back from other extracurricular activities that I could be doing on later. Rather, I just stick with my job and my academic performance, and I just preach to myself every day that I just only need to focus on the things I need to do for that day and that day alone. The next question to how did my experience in the previous question impact how I look at the world today? And that experience fundamentally changed the way that I view both success and the people around me. Before, I believed that success was more meant about pushing through every challenge on your own, and I often saw setbacks as more personal failures and just not trying hard enough, and I wasn't really considering the other perspective of how failures are more rather opportunities to learn. I viewed setbacks as an indication that it's all a matter of your own doing and you are ruining your future if a mistake has happened. When my academic performance declined, for example, the fear of being placed on academic probation consumed every single bit of my attention, and it was really hard to put myself back into focus on the current assignment or current exam, or what can I do in the immediate moment to remedy my situation. For the first several months of trying to recover my grades, once my GPA hit an all-time low, where if I even made a single mistake afterwards, like, I would probably be on academic probation at that point. My focus narrowed to just what I can do in the immediate moment. I wasn't thinking about any of my long-term goals. I was just simply trying to rebuild my academic footing, one task, assignment, exam, and day at a time. As I saw my grades improve over the next several months, so did my confidence come back. And regaining my academic momentum gave me the mental and emotional energy to look beyond just simply survival through school, and I really had a lot more capacity open up to begin planning for my future again. I found myself engaging more deeply within my coursework. I started participating in class more with greater confidence, and I no longer was allowing that embarrassment of my past mistakes to define how I saw myself as a student. That experience taught me that resilience is just not about never going through struggle. It's more about trusting that consistent effort and self-reflection, as well as a willingness to adapt, can rebuild your confidence over time within school. It also changed the way that I see others. I now recognize that people often carry invisible challenges that affect their performance outside of myself. It's quite way more common than I ever thought out to be. Even the people who always have been the most academic achieving people that I've come to know have gone through very similar struggles as well. I now try to approach others with empathy rather than assumptions, knowing that these setbacks rarely tell the full story of someone's abilities or potential, and knowing that just because someone seems to be doing fine on the outside, that doesn't mean they actually are. However, most importantly, I learned that growth is not measured by avoiding failure, but by how we respond to it. And recovering from that period really strengthened my belief in my own ability to overcome adversity, and it reinforced the importance of extending that same patience I gave to myself to others, and understanding that I have more depth to me in my identity than just simply my academic performance as well. To the next question about what about my personality, interests, or experiences makes me think that I could resonate with teens as their mentor. I believe that I could resonate with teens because I understand what it feels like to struggle with high expectations, self-doubt, challenges to self-identity, and the pressure and the need to succeed. During college, or in school in general, for others, balancing academics, work, and planning for my future became really overwhelming. And when my academic performance started to go down, I developed this all or nothing mindset, and it made it really difficult to regain my confidence. And as well, I try to hide this information about myself for as long as I can, just so I didn't have people, I didn't put myself at the risk of having other people change how they viewed me as a student, and therefore not confirm what I had also thought of myself at that time. And that's the lesson for those in their teen years, really, that social belonging becomes especially important during that time. Feeling that acceptance has a huge impact on self-esteem, and feeling the social pressure to fall in line with their peers in order to not feel left behind or rejected. And because of this, I understand more about what many teens may be dealing with in terms of the pressures that are not immediately visible, whether they come from school, family, their friends, or their own expectations of themselves, as well as knowing that oftentimes, especially in the precarious times of being a teenager, we often become our own harshest critics or judges. I also enjoy building genuine connections by actively listening and encouraging others, as well as helping them recognize strengths that they may not see them in themselves yet. Rather than trying to solve just every single problem for someone, I want to be a consistent, supportive presence who reminds them that setbacks are temporary, growth is possible, and that they don't have to navigate all of their challenges alone. And I take this to be a very profound and hugely wonderful opportunity, incredibly wonderful opportunity to become the kind of mentor that I would have benefited during my own moments of uncertainty. Someone who listens without judgment and helps others believe in their own potential. The next question being when someone like a colleague, friend, or family member comes to you for support, how do you think about supporting them, and what strategies do you rely on to help them? When someone comes to me for support, my first priority is to understand what they need rather than assuming that I already know the answer. Sometimes people are just looking for advice, but other times they simply need someone who will listen and uh, without judgment and will allow them to process what they're experiencing. I try to create a space where they feel comfortable in being as open and transparent as they would like, especially because I know that from my own experience how difficult it can be to open up when you're afraid of being judged or seen differently. Through this process, I do remind myself to cultivate empathy for the person I'm engaging with without connecting so deeply to what they're experiencing, where I get consumed with those feelings, which would potentially distract me from what's going on in the present. One strategy I rely on is asking thoughtful, open-ended questions instead of immediately offering solutions, aka leading with curiosity through the situation rather than simply telling them what I think personally could help them. I want to understand how they see the situation, what emotions they're experiencing, and what kind of support would be most helpful to them. After I go through asking them thoughtful and open-ended questions, if they decide that they need or would like advice, we collaborate on discerning the best action in order to plan our next steps or their next steps. Whenever the other person feels stuck in trying to discern what the next best step should be, I could ask them the question, well, I've gone through something similar in the past. Would you like me to share what I've done to handle it? Or something in line with that. We can then make a commitment into the discernment of what that best action is to take on, or the best next step that has been decided on. Making that commitment in taking those next steps helps with not risking all the other means of support that I've already helped set up in place with the other person throughout this conversation. I also try to help the other person narrow their focus when expressing what they feel overwhelmed about. During one of the most challenging periods in my life, in my own journey, someone encouraged me to take things one day at a time or one step at a time, rather than becoming consumed by everything that could go wrong or what has already gone wrong. And that advice helped me regain my footing, and it taught me that breaking a difficult situation down into much more manageable steps can make huge challenges like that feel less overwhelming and more digestible. Ultimately, I see support as empowering someone rather than just solving all of their problems for them. My goal is to actively listen with as much empathy as possible, encourage them to trust in their own ability to grow, and allow them to have that autonomy over their situation with guided support, and be a consistent presence who reminds them that they don't have to navigate challenges alone. The next question being, what is the most complex project, task, problem, or situation I've ever solved, and how did I organize, approach, and solve/overcome it? The most complex situation that I can recall encountering was while I was working in an inpatient psychiatric hospital on the adolescent and children's unit, where I supported patients through acute emotional and behavioral crises while also building therapeutic rapport within a much more structured clinical environment. One day that stands out to me in particular involved a 14-year-old patient who I had oriented onto the unit on her day of admission. During that initial interaction, I was able to learn a lot about her and her background as well as experiences at home. And I focused on meeting her with patience and understanding during such a very vulnerable time and transition in her life. And over time, through the consistent interactions on the unit, she expressed to me that she felt comfortable with me and described me as her favorite staff member because she felt understood and supported whenever I would show up for any of my shifts. I particularly came across a challenging moment with her when I had arrived for my shift and I observed her abruptly leave the day room of the unit, crying, screaming, and very visibly escalated. My immediate priority in that moment was to respond in a calm, grounded way while ensuring safety of other staff members and patients and beginning the de-escalation process with her. I approached her slowly and used a steady tone to help reduce any of the stimulation that she's feeling and communicate that I was here to provide support, rather trying to immediately correct whatever behavior she was exhibiting. I first focused on giving emotional validation and trying to understand what had triggered her distress while maintaining awareness of unit safety and following protocol. And what made this situation as complex as it was trying to balance the therapeutic relationship I had developed with her while maintaining that appropriate professional boundaries and clinical structure. She had exclaimed to me that I'm the only one who cares about her and she only needs me in her life. And although I understand from her perspective, it was a way of trying to communicate that I maybe could have been someone that was the only person that she had felt understood her in her entire life. However, that was a very clear sign to also keep that rapport going, but maintain that sense of professionalism between the two of us. I had to be very careful not to let that personal rapport override the need for clear, calm, and consistent behavioral support strategies, and at the same time, relying on that rapport in a healthier way, using trust and familiarity to help her feel safe enough to begin verbalizing what she was experiencing. Once she became more regulated, I supported her in re-engaging with other staff members and returning to a calmer state within the unit milieu. Afterwards, I reflected on how important consistency, emotional regulation, and boundaries are within psychiatric care, especially with adolescents who are still developing coping skills and emotional awareness and boundaries. Overall, that experience strengthened my ability to remain calm within emotionally intense situations, reinforced the importance of balancing empathy with structure, and deepened my understanding of how trust and therapeutic rapport can be used appropriately to support de-escalation and emotional stability within a clinical setting. The next question being if I can share a time when I had to set boundaries or say no to something, even though it was difficult, and how did I navigate that? And a time like that comes to my mind when I was in a romantic relationship during a period when I was already managing a hectic, demanding academic schedule, a job, and multiple responsibilities. And more importantly, this is when I had just gone back into the momentum and stability that I needed for me to continue doing well in college. My partner and I were in frequent communication throughout the day, and there was an expectation of being consistently available to respond to messages and emotionally engage in real time, not just later or only whenever it was convenient to respond back. At first, I didn't recognize that this had an impact on my ability to focus in school and be able to recharge and rest. I really valued the relationship and wanted to be attentive, so I, at that time, often prioritized immediate responses even when I was in the middle of studying or trying to complete important academic tasks. And over time, however, I realized that this pattern was contributing to increased stress and making it difficult for me to be fully present in the relationship or other areas and aspects of my life. And what I had decided was I addressed it with my partner directly and in a very honest, transparent way, that while I cared about our relationship and wanted to stay connected, I needed to set clearer boundaries around my time and attention, especially during study periods and moments when I needed to focus or rest. I explained that I could not always be immediately responsive, but that was a very necessary change for me to do in order to maintain balance in my life and to perform well academically. What made this as difficult as it was on my end, I had this concern of setting a boundary accidentally being misinterpreted as a lack of care or emotional distance. However, I recognized that without it, without having to, if I weren't to set this boundary, I was becoming overwhelmed and less effective in both my academic life and my life emotionally within the relationship. And after having that conversation, I found that I was able to better manage my time and mental energy, and the relationship became healthier and more sustainable in the long run. It reinforced for me that setting boundaries is not about reducing care or commitment to anything or anyone, but creating structure that allows for, in terms of a relationship or friendship, allows for both people to be more present and intentional in how they show up for each other. The next question of on a scale of 1 to 10, how I would describe my current emotional regulation and ability to handle and manage intense emotions, and what do I do to help myself stay regulated? On that scale of 1 to 10, I would rate my current emotional regulation and ability to manage intense emotions at a 9 out of 10. I've been in therapy for the last 10 and a half years of my life, where emotional regulation was a consistent skill check that my therapist and I would do check-ins whenever we could in our sessions. And I feel that I'm generally able to stay grounded within high stress situations, while I also recognize that emotional regulation is not something that is a fixed trait rather than an ongoing, like more of an ongoing skill. And I continue to refine it as more and more as I gain more wisdom and experience through growing older and facing a growing variety of different situations in life. And what helps me stay regulated, first and foremost, is creating space between whatever emotions that I'm experiencing and my response to them. In moments of high intensity or high stress, I've learned to be able to pause and focus on what is immediately within my control, rather than reacting impulsively or becoming too overwhelmed by everything all at once. And this approach has become especially important during my academic challenges, when I also, in past professional experiences working with an inpatient psych, I was able to shift away from my own emotions within a given moment to really maintain my professionalism in patient interactions. And I was able to shift away from this all or nothing mentality and mindset, and rather instead focus on small, manageable steps to regain stability and regain my momentum. And I also rely on usually breaking those situations down into perspective. When emotions feel very intense, I try to identify what is actually happening versus what am I interpreting from this moment, which helps reduce any sort of catastrophizing and allows me to respond more effectively. And over time, I've learned that naming my emotions and what truly I am feeling underneath, uh, and understanding its importance really helps me regulate and be a lot more intentional with my emotions rather than suppressing it and just acting immediately on them. Another strategy I like for myself is using support systems when possible. I've learned that talking through my challenges with people I trust, that I care about, and know that they care about me, helps me process my emotions in a significantly healthier way and prevents me from falling in a pitfall that I've had before, which was isolating myself when I felt overwhelmed and overstimulated. This also reinforced for me the importance of asking for help earlier rather than waiting for all of the stress of day-to-day life build up in me. Overall, I would describe my emotional regulation as strong, but also just with throughout life, it's something that actively develops. My own experiences have taught me that staying regulated is not simply trying to avoid intense emotions, but being able to recognize them, responding thoughtfully to them, using structure and perspective and support to remain as grounded as possible. And it has been shown to still be effective even in those difficult moments. And to the last question of what has been the period of greatest change for me in my life, how did it make me feel, and how did I handle it? The period of greatest change in my life was when I moved out of living with my parents in their home when I was 22 years old. Although it was an exciting step forward towards independence, it also brought a significant shift in responsibility, structure, and emotional adjustment as I had transitioned to managing more aspects of life on my own. Initially, the experience felt simultaneously empowering and overwhelming. I was adjusting to living independently while balancing school, work, uh, and personal responsibilities without the immediate support system that I had been so used to up until that point. There were moments where I felt the weight of having to organize everything on my own, such as time management, finances, daily structure, and maintaining balance in overall all of my aspects in life, all while still trying to perform just as well in other areas of my life outside of those things. I had also, for the first time in my life, experienced where my parents weren't checking in on me to see if I was actually doing my homework or studying, as well as the first time that I had full autonomy over my daily schedule and social life without having to ask for permission or face unsolicited advice or criticism. Over that time, I realized that my motivation to keep my grades, as well as I had been expected to keep them, as well as just how well I had been succeeding in school, um, even outweighed my own motivation to keep up my good grades, which played a role in how I lost my momentum to keep up with those said good grades in school. I learned how important it was to create structure intentionally rather than being so reliant on external systems. I began to develop routines, plan my time more deliberately, and prioritize responsibilities in a way that allowed me to stay grounded rather than reactive. I also became more aware of the importance of self-discipline and consistency, especially during periods of time of intense stress or uncertainty. Emotionally, this transition helped me become ultimately more self reliant while also deepening my understanding of when and whom to seek support from. I realized that independence doesn't mean handling everything alone, but rather learning how to take responsibility while still maintaining connection with others when needed. It taught me how to manage change more effectively and how to build structure in unfamiliar environments and how to remain grounded while navigating newer responsibilities, which all of which continue to influence how I approach challenges today.